Alright, testing. Alright, maintenance instruction 1209. Recording. 1209E, revision E. Electric Motor Division, General Motors Corporation, LaGrange, Illinois, USA. Hyatt journal box. General description. Hyatt roller bearing journal box with the figure 1 and 2 are used for the passenger freight with 2,700 horsepower. Transfer locomotive. The journal box operate with a guide's pedestal with a truck frame. Journal box is composed only of a few major parts of the housing, the bearing, assembly, the rear end of the cab, the retaining ring, with the thrust bearing, spring, the spring bushing covers, and inspection cover figure 3. In addition, these are of the few minor parts, such as the gasket, stove, the cap screws, etc. Journal boxes are made of the two types known as plain box, the combination box. The combination boxes are similar to the plain box, except for the outer end of the modified to receive the application speedometer, speed recorder, the train control devices. Usually one of the two boxes each truck has arrangement. Each journal box has a serial number stamped on the front of the box near the inspection cover. Housing. The housing electrical carbon steel case of the housing is a cast with a flange of the engine engage both sides of the pedestal of the truck frame and allow the box to move freely in the vertical direction under the coil spring action. Lower part of the housing forms an oil surface reservoir, sump in which the foreign matter will settle away from the bearing operating surfaces of the oil. The issue supersedes cancels all. Figure 1 shows the inspection cover, the stench bomb provisions, spring bushing cover, filler plug, drain plug, pedestal with a tie bar, inspection cover, stench bomb provisions, spring bushing cover, application cover. Cancels all previous issue of the oil filling hole. Figure 1 opened directly into the oil reservoir and is so placed so that the oil will overflow the maximum desirable level of the reach for the drain and hole provided immediately between the filling of the hole, meaning of the box can with the completely drained and lubricant onto the combination box with the filling of the draining hole located with the right side of the box under the spring pushing covers. Figure 3 shows the cutaway of the Hyatt journal boxing show the retaining ring, inspection cover, thrust bearing, rear end cap, water guard seal, the bearing assembly cutaway in the housing, and spring bushing and thrust bearings. The pedestal weighs out the side of the housing, provided with the renewable, the heat-treated seal line of the drive in the face of the line with its front flange liners are welded to the box. Stainless steel welding rod should also always be used, as it has been found to be exceptionally well with the provisions are made with the application of electrical heat indicators such as the stench bomb where either is desired. Bearing assembly of the bearing used with the Hyatt journal box is considered a heavy cylindrical inner and outer race with the two separate rows with a large diameter solid rollers operating in two heavy one-piece with the bronze cage separated with a spacer ring with a figure 4 with the rings and spacer ring and the rollers are specially selected to allow selected alloy steel with both rollers and racers are grounded closed, limited properly fit with the operating clearance. Inner race figure 5 shrunk with the drawn portion of the axle. After it is in place, it forms a permanent part of the axle as wheel. Show for the inner race, the cage, the space ring, a roller, and an outer race. The Hyatt journal bearing, inner race, cage, space ring, roller, outer race. Works have been done with distributing racing so much for the wheel seat with a diameter large enough to allow the wheel to pass over the inner race. The inner end of the inner race is designed to the patented feature which prevents stress concentration termination of the shrink fit. This is accomplished by tampering the inner end of the race bore figure 6 for the amount of the shrink fit allowance allowed for the shrinking fit with the pressure tied with gradually with the prevents abrupt change of the surface of the stress of the axle, thereby removes possibly progressive fracture, with especially with important when it's considered with a rapid rotating journal with a suggested stress reversal, severe impacts outer race figure 4 with the tap of the slightly fading. Housing forms the outer path of which of the roller travel. The rollers are plain straight solid cylinders and are flat end the ground closed, limited to secure uniformity, diameters, length, with the end of squareness. They are two identical rollers in each bearing. The rollers carry radial loads only. Alright, figure 5 shows the inner race of the water and water guard. Water guard, inner race, axle. Cages and separated, the cage and separators in figure 4 of which are the two pair bearing, and then figure 6 show the inner race tamper relief, end of detail with detail below, inner race tamper relief patented. Made entirely of the one piece that don't join with the cage bar with integral with the end of the ring of the both ends of the save of the cage and similar to cylindrical ladder. An operation cage with the assigned with the inner race, thereby eliminating possibility of centricity with the speed with the only purpose of the cage to separate with the rollers, keep them in proper alignment with the braces. Cage does not come in contact with each of the other with any of the box part with the normally necessary to make the cage replacements before the entire bearing has run out with a spacer. Ring, figure 4, separated with the two rows of roller longitudinal. Each of the bearings hardened with the ground alloy steel with a floating ring, which is inserted and bore outer reef directly contact with the roller end with the spaces and so sufficient width to prevent cages from touching the center of the bearing. The rollers are retained in the proper longitudinal position with the bearing and the hardening retainment surface of the retainment ring on the rear end and cap. The retainment and surface contact end with the rollers outside of the cages do not come in contact with the cages rear end cap. The rear end cap of the cast iron strip with the rear closure with the embody with the hardened treatment of the surface, the other endwise retainment of the rollers oil seal with the water guard with the ring with excluding the foreign matter. There's nothing in connection with the seal with which touches the axle, thereby forward nowhere will occur with an inwardly extend flange surrounds the inner and outer inner and an inner race with small cleanup of the oil which pass with the flange and flung the outward central figure of the horse's angular space to provide with the end of the cover to the catch of its oil with the drain it back to the oil reservoir that the object is to prevent. Any oil with the collecting of the underside of the axle will be accomplished with the shape of the form of the annular reshuffle the location of the parts leading to the reservoir of the baffle is provided against the upward surge of oil from the reserve itself with inside of the diameter end of the cap that fits with the closed-through clearance. Heavy graphite grease gaskets, 1/16 of the inch thick, provided with the rear end of the cap and inspection covered spring bush and covered retaining ring. The retaining ring in figure 3 is a high strength with the iron cap with the preventive of the rotation on the two stud planes with the engaged hole with the flange carry with the hard and retainment surface of the outer end of the roller of the ring also serve for the purpose of feed the lubricant from the roller operating speed with the thrust bearing as the roller suddenly revolve the oil which is carried with forced outward with the ends of the bearing with a groove that is provided adjacent with the hardened outer retainment face with the collect of the oil which allows it to flow through the suitable ports to a small pan lip cap at the inner side of the inspection cover where it drains directly to the thrust bearing with the circulation will provide with sufficient oil with the thrust bearing lubrication. The inspection covers the series of the clove of the opening of the front of the box and previously explained the specific conducting oil with the thrust bearing with the inspection cover is made of the cast steel thrust bearing. Thrust bearing provides me with absorbed lateral thrust of the thrust bearing comprises a steel casting on which cap of the thrust face of the bronze, a combination box figure 7 of the hole with the bronze or a hole provided with the center with the thrust bearing with the end 3 of the springs 2 with the admit with the central drive shaft which engages the spline hole with the center of the axle drive with the speedometer with the other drive lights is mounted within the journal boxes. Figure 7 show the cross section of combination journal box show the wheel hub, the axle, water guard, rear end gasket, sub equalizer pad, inspection cover, the gasket, retaining ring, gasket, speed recorder, adapter, end thrust bearing cover, gasket, thrust bearing spring assembly, and housing. Alright, the water guard shown in figure 5 with a circular steel member to machine with the inside with the diameter shrunk with a termed portion of the outer end of the wheel hub with the extent with an annular lip with which with an inch of the annular reshuffle of the rear end cap of the water guard remains in play with the life of the wheel that can be reused with other wheels. Maintenance, interchangeable. All of the parts, both of the journal box with the bearings are interchangeable. When maneuvered with the interchangeable lube, to maintain with the entire life of the installation, all of the parts except for the rollers and the outer race of the rollers and outer races should be treated as a unit to kept together. However, they should be replaced with it being necessary for the new outer race that may be made with the rollers, but the new rollers should never be mated with the worn race surfaces that can be avoided with the turning of the worn out race of 180 degrees in the housing so to prevent the unused surface for loading zone with the provided with the race that has not been previously been turned. If the race has been previously turned, the new outer race should be applied within the new rollers. If the replacement should become necessary, either the box or bearing with the proceeding in accordance with the instruction hereafter, the replacement part of the inspection. In taking care of the roller bearing with the first consideration, cleanliness imperative of the bearing with the inside of the box kept as nearly as possible with the free of the outside grit and dirt with the nose. Do not handle the bearing with a dirty hand with a use clean wipe tail with a wipe with various parts. Use waste of the rags is not recommended because the lint will adhere to the metal surfaces. With the inspection, cover the spring with the cover removed with the spring brushing with the thrust bearing with the springs can be withdrawn with the inspection with the distributing any of the part of the box. If the end of the axle happens to be pressed again with the axle block with it will of course be necessary to relieve the pressure before attempting to withdraw with the thrust bearing springs. Journal box and bearings should be complete with a disassembled and inspected clean with the intervals specified with the scheduled maintenance program. Kerosene suitable solvent should be used with the cleaning immediately after the parts of the washing and inspected. They must be kept clean until the reassemble the clean wiped and cloth with clean hands are essential. Do not put clean clean bearing with the black parts for the dirty bins for the U with the clean paper under them to cover them until needed. They are to remain at the end of the length of the time. They should be oiled to prevent rust and washed again before the reassembled for the surface if desired with the Hyatt or electric motive representative to be present during the inspection of the Hyatt locomotive journal bags that can be arranged with the requested report condition of the file furnished for the electric motor division with an extra copy of the Hyatt bearing division General Motors. For inspection of the journal box with the bearing file with the procedure suggested to provide a good supply with a cleaning wipe with the towel with the brush with the suitable with a shallow washing pan with the kerosene and the other cleaning fluid. Provide a supply with a clean paper to cover the bench with the cover the parts for after they have been cleaned. Clean lateral clearances make with a note with the necessary corrections. Figure 8, show the assembly of the rolling bearings. 3, the draining oil with the remove of the box with the draining set with the down with the close end. 4, inspect with the inner reef with the sign with the dent and with the screwing pitting of the protect with the exposed journal. 5, remove the rear end cap to take care of the knot to tear the gasket. 6, remove the roller assembly with the upper seal with the liner seal. On part 8052584, round with the roller handling the and figure 8 with the remove of the roller bearing assembly with the journal box. Always play with the seal over the rollers the seal over the rollers before they are completely withdrawn from the brace to prevent the rollers from falling out of the cage. Tag cage to show the journal box's serial number to position of the box, whether the front or the rear of the rollers should be kept within the cage when they belong. Turn boxes open into the end of the over shallow pans drain. Remove the inspection cover with the spring bushing, covered with the withdrawal with the thrust bearing with the spring brush with the outer reef, the retainment of the ring with the not necessary to be removed. The cleaning, but can be desired to remove the outer reef of the retainment ring and the U of the headed puller as shown figure 9. Or show the screw put material hold the route hold the seal and that one required NT thread count 7 thread length C note cyanide end of the screw. Then show the plates. This is puller out of the puller for removing the outer race of the retaining ring. Place the thrust beam with the position again with the inner front face of the box with a hole with the puller with a plate with a position against the retaining ring with as shown figure 9 with the threaded screw with the root of the puller plate with until the contact with the reach of the thrust plate with the continue with the rotation with the screw will remove the bolt of the outer race and the retaining ring from the housing of the screw is rotated with the ear of the motor with a considerable time and effort will be saved. 9. Scrape the accumulation of the dirt offside with the journal box housing. Watch inside with the thoroughly which clean with the kerosene blow out with the press air. If desired, insert of the housing can be immersed with a hot alkaline clean solution. This is done with the should be subsequent to wash down with the inside with the kerosene blown out with air. Do not immerse the stench of the smoke bomb that hold the solution that may be discharged. Wash end caps. Inspection cover the axle block with the trims all over the wall with all the rollers and cages regions of the cleaning the kerosene before dyeing. With a small stiff brush for the necessary to clean with the various parts, especially with the bearing cage. Any of the patent and non-corrosive cleaning solutions may be used, provided that the parts are subsequently washed and oiled. Alright, show the 1/8 nominal inch, 4-inch maximum per side, 1/8 of an inch, quarter-inch maximum per side. Pedestal liner 1/16, 3/16 of an inch maximum per side. Total 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch box serial no here. Axle and thrust plain view of the plain journal box. Thoroughly inspect all of the parts and note the condition, even the serial with the number of the journal box with the axle location on the box with the locomotive with the reference suggested the particular attention to be played with the particular like with the subject to the heavy of these will include with the journal box line with the direct pedestal liner slash bearing with the roller retaining surface with all bearing parts with the thrust bearing which should be accommodated very slow. Under a normal condition, the combined wear of the line of the thrust bearing should not be allowed to accommodate beyond the amount of which proper lateral clearance is maintained. See with the figure 10 with the roller retainment surface of the bearing surface may be to continue with the U with the long of the day or the free with the fatigue and the rust. Fatigue is usually recognized with the appearance of the pitting and shelling of the operating surfaces, brought with the requirement of replacement for any of the reason. Make special note of them and record, segregate with a further examination. Ship the pack to the electric motor division when replacing the pedestal of the way liners. They should be firmly clamped into position before welding strip liner with the electrically welded at the top of the bottom of the 4-inch over the minute slide. Always stainless steel welding rod. Drive with the force line with the weld directly with the housing of the top of the bottom and then 4 holes from the central portion of the liner. 11. Reassemble all of the parts. Retaining ring and the outer race should be disassembled first if they have them removed the housing file with the roller. Assemble the rear end of the caps. Thrust bearing and spring with the spring bushing. Cover the inspection. Cover the thrust bearing held in position through the inspection opening of the spring lever. The spring shim that may be inserted through the opposite side of the driven end of the spring bushing already assemble the chamber of the chamfer of the spring leaf that should be played with adjacent to the front of the box shaft. Flat chamfer of the spring leaf that should be played with over the inside of the shim that should be played with between the two spring. Leave the easy of the assembly with the protection of the shim with the distortion of the outer race that should be the oil before inserting the roller assembly all of the part with the marked and end of the roller end over the center of spacer. ring in the proper position in front of the rear of the bearing. When reassembling the rollers into the cave, the first plate for the upper line of the shield around with the circumference of the cage shown figure 8 with the rollers can be ensured with the cage window will be held falling out with the seal of the well of the rollers and play with the cage to be lowered vertically into the outer race, sliding with the seal of the off of the as the rollers into the race. Roller assembly can be best handled with extending both hands through the cage and lifting it from the bottom. When the box is assembled, tie a clean cloth over the rear of the opening with the protect with the interior until the put with the back on the axle. Be sure the rear of the cover the screw with the spring bush and cover the screw with the tie with the screw lead wire with the inspection cover the screw with the knee to only be hand tightened at the time. 12 wash axle journal and include with the wire guard before the box that they're put back on the axle as washing the inner rate for the distributed oil with the rotate of the box for the which over the journals distributed with the oil of the truck frame that may be lowered over the boxes after placing the equalizer pad with the equalizing plate in position on the top of the box. After the box and axles are reinstalled with the truck, the check the lateral clearance outlining paragraph of the clearance. Where limited in tightening wire and inspection cover screws. 14 fill box with the oil that overflow the level of the filler plug and as the box hold with approximately 9 pints. Alright, show the overall length of the polish from the tool of the market scrap with the champ identification here. And if the axle be shaped with the square ground face with the machine smooth with the polish and free with the tool marks do not stand but identification end of the finished axle. Over finished wheeled hubs, grind and the bearing seat of the ground with a uniform diameter turnout. Throughout the taper with the exceed with a 1,000 inch per foot with the out of the round 1,000 inch maximum. Alright, axle. Figure 11 show the axle design you with the combination boxes with the same of the axle, the plane with the box, except for the end of the detail of the combination type of the axle. You with either plane with a plane or with the combination box with only with the type of the front of the trim with or with the inch of the accurate axle measurement and the micrometer you with the check with against the known standard of the axle should always measure the air cold when never be with the warm with the machining. All the filler with the axle end must be polished free with the tool mark for each time of the wheel with our term with all burrs and irregularities should be polished off of the axle's end. Wheel work. Wheel must be carefully made with each end of the axle high speed with the width with the modern train with the operate round with the wheel with extremely important with this required with the particular vigilance within the wheel with the turn with the ordinary wheel lay at the pad particular and has then seen the long surface of the standard acceptable on the path of the passenger free surface will not be found suitable for the high speed operation of the wheel should be bound with the with it evenly spaced with regard with the axle center line when the wheels are with the pressed off with the particular with the lighter with the be careful as you apply with the pressure uniformity opening over the end of the axle to avoid upsetting it. Always use the self-aligning pressure block with between the end of the axle, the ram of the press of the upside with the condition of the axle end, which will cover the journal.
I am going to send the Popeye home with Paul.
All right. All right, where were we? We'll just start. Wheels must be carefully made with each half with the high speed with which modern trains operate with the round of the wheel with extremely important with the required with the particular vigilance with the wheel with the term with the ordinary wheel lay with the particular has been long service. Standard acceptable the path of the passenger freight surface will not be found suitable. The high speed operation of the wheels should be balanced so that they are evenly split with regard with the axle center line with when wheels are pressed on or off particularly later with be careful to be applied with the pressure uniformly over the end of the axle to avoid upsetting it. Always self-align with the pressure block between the end of the axle with the ram of the press for the upset with the condition of the axle will cover the journal with the swell locally with the outer end which will be transferred with the outside with the inner race as a high spot with the operating surface. This would not only invite with the even failure with the race but it might even interfere with the assembly. Figure 12 show the procedure free of the wheel for wheel removal and then it shows the wheel and then this part over here. Over the box over the journal bearing self-aligning the pressure block with the wheel with the press on the mount with the dismount with the wheel with the remove the inner race with the strap with the wheel have the ensure for the good resolve there is usually recommended to all of the wheel work be done without distributing the inner race with this should however the particular again for the damage applying with a sheet with the copper to brass sleeve with the over them wheel work with the process figure 12 water guard remain with the plate with the life of the wheel. When the new wheels that are applied, water guards can be pried off after being heated sufficiently with the torch relief of the string fit with the same water with the guard with the with the new wheel with the remove of the water with the guard with the wheel hub after the wheel has been removed from the axle. Be sure that the water guard is correctly positioned with the shrinking in its plate with the mount with the water guards. Heat them and then open flame with the torch black heat with the 500 degrees to 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Shrink them and plate with the wheel hub. They should be pushed and tight against the end of the wheel hub. Procedure of the wheel removal of the wheel journal boxes are removed from the axle of the wheel work loose with the dirt with the remove them in the rear of the cover before the completely remove the after the box removed. That should be carefully inspected the inside of the out. The interior with should be protected with trying a clean cloth over the rear over the opening until they're ready to put the box back on the journal. Mounting inner race. It should be necessary to remove the inner race of the race can be removed with the journal by pressing the off of the wheel with this is done by the interposing the display collar between the race and the wheel hub of the figure 13. When removing the inner race for the pressing of it off the wheel with a careful examination of the race should be determined whenever the knot is suitable with the condition to be reapplied. After removing the inner race, always inject the back with the journal with a defect with the side of the accessory before and inlay with the new race for the supply with the heating of the oil with a maximum 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Shrinking it into the plate for the heated of the race can be slid into the plate with the taking not to get within the cock or stuck fast out with a proper position. Use of the burlap, P for the cup, the recommended with the hand with a hot race split cowl with the shown figure 14 with the clamp with the onion with the journal with the space with the proper distance with the journal fillet due with the slight variance of the axle length with the preferable to locate with the race with the fillet rather than end of the axle on with the no condition should the shrink fit with the race then cross to the onion with the journal fillet P figure 15 with the dimension of the inner race fillet. And we'll go back over this one. This show the filler ring and then the outer ring, and then it showed the group figures A, B, and C. Figures A, B, and C made of 1020 steel with a similar available split ring. Figure A, B, and C, and water guard, roller bearing, inner race, copper block, 120 steel block to suit, steel finish all over. 14 split collar. Alright, lubrication journal should be lubricated with a trape mineral oil with the containing of the filler with the gravity should not be with the filling of the box. The located of the locomotive should be the level of the track. Each block should be filled with its show the 15, show the locating of the inner race. Overflow of the filler hole, be sure of the oil with the plug be placed securely. Always use the cleaning container with the cans of the roller with the bearing oil. Caution that use the oil that has been left standing in the open paw. It made it dirt. The length of the time between the oil level inspection varies according to the daily mileage and speed. With the best add with the oil, but after each trip of the time with the sufficient with the experience has been established to indicate the proper oiling intervals. Always wipe the dust with the dirt away from the oil plug before it is removed. It is important that the oil have the fluid with the operating temperature for the following specification general with the guidance selection of lubricants with the velocity with the 100 Fahrenheit degrees, 400 to 1006 C bolt, viscosity with the 210, 5 to 75 seconds to say bolt flash, 325 minimum. Pour point 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, natural neutralization value 0.20 milligrams potassium hydroxide per gram max. Use low viscosity over the cold climate with high viscosity over the warmer climate. It would be found with the general, however, the oil within the viscosity with the 500 to 700 seconds at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Pour type with the 0 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit will be satisfactory average of all year operating either in warm or cold climate. No, any oil reputable manufacturer that meets with this above specification may be used. Checking oil level to remove the filler plug. Insert oil with the gauge through the hole with the figure 16. Make sure that the gauge is horizontal with the hole with the oil marking with the gauge readings 1/2 inch or more with the oil should be added. The minimum oil level is 3/16 of an inch on the gauge figure 17. Replacement. All questions are properly procedure in order of installing the placement. Show the full mark 0 oil 1/2 minimum level 3/16 of an inch. Insert oil gauge, checking oil level, and it showed the, replacement parts referred to the electric motor division with the vibe with the two basic rule with applied with the replacement of the Hyatt roller bearing the journal boxes over the railway journals. Rule 1, new inner race with the outer race with the separated with the center ring with the journal box part that applied with the either the individually collected at any time without affecting the operation of the bearing with they are applied. Rule number 2, with the roller replacement necessary with the roller should never be made with the worn out of the race surface, either determined out of the race 180 degrees into the bore present with the first rash surface. If there's previously has been done, the new outer race should be installed with the new roller. Storage and spare parts. With the exemption of the bronze cave of the axle block with the bearing parts, all of the machine surface of the journal block for the parts should be kept with the grease to prevent rusting of the wind. While storage, occasional inspection with the parts of the storage is also recommended. Bearings should not be stored with a assembled condition. Roller race for the cages should be kept separate. Always store with the material with the dry plate. With the damp may ruin it. In the short time, care should be taken to prevent finger rust or furnish surface due to the moisture of the hand of the fingers while handling. Spare axles of the storage should be carefully protected with a heavy coating with the rust of the prevented but applied over the entire machine portion. The parts are drawn with the surface that they should be thoroughly washed and lubricated before applied. If the practice of some of the roads store spare axles with the current use of the journal box them out of them, while the procedure may seem to contradict some of the instructions given above with a successful use of the particular with a short period of time. If proper attention is given to prevent the corrosion, each journal box must be fully lubricated and must be pushed out of the axle proper position, such much to the top of the journal with the heavier of the bottom of the some portion. They must be tended to the rotate inverted position should be prevented by blocks and other suitable means because it will result in the loss of a large part of the oil that each of the blocks should be spun around a few times every few days. If it's enough to lubricate the bearing bearing to prevent the parts of the remaining in the same position for the appreciable length of time. If the roller bearing is allowed to remain stationary for a long period of time, and it may be ruined with the corrosion of the all contact surface due to galvanic ash and condensation due to the atmospheric temperature change. These parts are not used to assemble but stored separately. Bearing journals and all of the associated parts of the patent, therefore, it is not advisable to purchase the other genuine part of their use suitable for the material that can be considered with serious failures. Previously, some journal boxes were manufactured with a wear plate with a fitted with a bevel, the pedestal flange on the box with a weld separated the strip and indicated the figure 18. No, not being directly fastened to the lug, looseness was developed in the lug itself rather than the liner. To overcome the objection of the box is now manufactured with a straight surface with the lug, with which is welded at a 3/8 inch bevel the liner. Should the old style liner should be loosened if the recommended that the lug machine is taken in with a 3/8 inch liner. As indicated in figure 18, clearance of the wear limit to each for the journal box with the initial of the provision flat hole clearance of 1/8 inch beyond the end of the axle thrust for the bearing, 1/16 inch between the inner pedals for the flange of the pedal for the addition with the thrust bearing springs with the be deflective with the 1/4 inch until the run of the pressure for the thrust bearing with the axle end. Thus, their total available lateral movement of 7/16 per inch per box. Figure 10. When the inspection of lateral clearance for the inside of the potential wave lane of the journal box should be in contact with the con truck with the pedals to remove the small inspection cover the front journal box with lateral clearance between the end of the axle thrust for the bearing face for the maybe the inspection with the clearance should be measured at both of the ends of the axle. Average of the two measurements should never exceed 7/16 of an inch. Each time the trucks are shop, they should be trammed and checked for the alignment of the cross going with the diagonal. Tramming should be plus or minus 1/8 of an inch. Longitudinal lateral tramming may be between pedals shown between plus or minus 1/16 of an inch. The width of the pedestal opening should not vary with more than plus 16 of an inch minus nothing. Allowable limits were able to 1/16 each of the pedals of the journal box line with 1/8 of an inch wear with the face of the thrust bearing. The wear should be not allowed to accumulate and except for the limits of wear thrust bearing. Surface with the width and screw for the 1/8 of an inch into the sheet should be replaced with a new thrust for the bearing. No lateral adjustment for the wear of the mains and shims is required. Alright, so new strip liner part, old liner, bevel, the separate strip, the finish of the strip of the weld, 4-inch long with a 7 5/8 inch between liners, new old style, old journal box flange line with a machine 1/8 inch off journal box flange with the mount, new strip liner, welded both ends, stainless steel welding rod. Alright, maintenance data. Nominal drawing dimensions provided with the following clearance. Total literal pedestal clearance 1/8 and 3/8 of an inch limit. Total longitudinal pedestal weight clearance new 1/8 of an inch limited 1/4 inch. Clearing axle end with the thrust bearing 1/8 of an inch new 1/4 inch port side. Deflection of the thrust spring 1/4 inch 1/4 inch new and limited. Clearance wheel hub the rear cover 1 1/4 inch and limited 3/4 inch. Equipment list show the filler, outer ring, splitter ring, and self-aligning pressure blocks for the devices passing off the inner race. Outer race puller tool assembly 8062137. Inner race locator refer to figure 15 and 16. Speedometer driving bushing extractor. Adapter axle center protects speedometer driver bushing with the ring of the wheels. Oil gauge roller retaining seal used in removing the bearing. Show that this number of drawing is only furnished on request. And this was the reading of the maintenance instruction of the Hyatt journal boxes.